Paul Bondar, Republican candidate for the newly drawn 32nd Congressional District. Thank you so much and welcome to Eye on Politics.
Well, thank you, Jack. I'm very happy to be here.
Nice to see you. So
Thank you.
Why are you running for Congress and what is the essence of your campaign?
Well, I think for so long, especially during COVID, is when I realized Americans deserve more. We deserve more, and we have to have really good representation. And I came to the conclusion that, you know, you can either be a Monday morning quarterback and you can just sit there and complain, or you can do something about it. And so after COVID, I said, I want to get involved. I want to represent people. I've been a businessman for 20 plus years. I started a business with one employee in the crash of 2008. And I started from very little, and I grew that company from one employee up to one of the top 120 something agencies in America. You have to be right a lot of times in order to do that. It's time somebody's right for the American people and the folks here of Texas.
You've got a crowded field of candidates, as you know, there are 9. And so why should Republican primary voters select you over the others?
Well, it is a crowded field, but a couple things. Nothing comes easy. You have to go out and work for it. I've been one of the ones that have been working and consistently involved. Secondarily, most importantly, I live in the district. You have a couple candidates who don't. And I don't understand how you can ask somebody to vote for you if you can't even vote for yourself, right? So there's a couple candidates that I think are going to have some issues with that, because people want to have a representative that understands them. I go to the local church, they can see me, I'll be held accountable, and they say, Paul, why did you vote for something like that? And I'm going to be able to explain to them why I did and why they're going to be happy or not. When you don't live in the district and you don't have that accountability, I think people are going to be, people are afraid of that type of dynamic. And so I think that that's a qualifying issue that is really, really super important, and a disqualifying issue that is going to be a deal breaker for many.
I know you ran for Congress in Oklahoma a couple of years ago, but you're in Rockwall now.
Been in Rockwall for 6 years, and I had a secondary residency that I made into a primary residency because people in Oklahoma were saying, hey, we need somebody to run, we need help, we are not getting good representation. And I turned them down, and that was 2022. And they kept asking in 2023 and 2024. I said, let's go try to help. I was talked in, I was flattered that people would say, they said, hey, we get all our best recruits to play at OU from Texas. It might just take a guy from Texas to get our politics right. It was very flattering. But ultimately, I don't think it was the right thing, because I underestimated how important it is to really live in the district. And Jack, the thing is, I was able to vote for myself. I had property, I had a ranch, well over 500 acres. I had a vested interest at least. We have a candidate right now that's living in the shadow of the Oklahoma border right now, that's about as far away as what I was when I ran, initially and decided to change my residence to my primary residence, but hasn't done that and can't vote for himself, and has no vested interest. The irony on this is the underestimation that you have to have roots. So I'm going back to my Rockwall roots. I have 6 years in that community, and people are going to want to have a representative that represents them. And so that was a great opportunity and a great lesson to me on just how important. And ultimately, did I win that race? No, because it wasn't the right race for me. This is the right race now because I'm in the district. I'm in Rockwall County, and I'm proud to be able to say I'm the only Rockwall County resident that's running. But most importantly, I'm in the district when others are not, and that's the commitment people are looking for.
So you are advertising on TV. I saw a billboard in Dallas of you. What does that say about your campaign?
It says we're committed. It says it's a real campaign. I think anybody can put their name on the ballot, and I appreciate anybody that wants to get involved with civics. But if you're going to be a real candidate, you have to commit to the people. And I have put a lot of billboards up, and I also put them up in rural areas, because what people have to understand that this district needs to have somebody represent everybody. It means the folks in Dallas have to have a representative, but the folks out in Camp and Upshur County, Rains, Wood County, they need to also have a voice as well. They need to have a representative. And we're going to fracture this district if you don't have a representative that's going to be there for everybody. And those billboards are a sign and a commitment that, hey, I'm spending money to put a billboard up Why? Because you matter. You are important. That sign is more than just symbolism. That is a commitment. And I was in camp in Upshur County twice in the last week. Why was I there? Because it's important that talk is cheap, but actions speak louder than words. And going there and meeting with the people and having conversations that are thoughtful and asking them, what are your concerns? They're concerned about rural water. They're concerned about lithium and mining rights, mineral rights. They're concerned about blue creep coming in from other districts that's going to take away their culture. And being able to understand those issues and say, as your next representative, we're going to take those considerations and we're going to put in a field office and we're going to hire folks that are going to represent our Congressional District 32, local folks, and they're going to be there to help with any kind of issues you may have. That's important as well. They want to make sure. When I ran a company, an agency, I had branches that I made throughout numerous different states. It was important to have local representation, people that you can have access to be able to get things done. And folks in these other areas, I guarantee you that's going to be the model, because it's time that government works for the people. People are tired of working for the government.
Are you expecting a runoff? And if so, what are you doing to make sure that you're one of the people in the runoff?
Well, I think with 9 people on the ballot, I think that's very likely. It will be a runoff. We're doing very well. We're positioned, and I think really what we need to do is just continue to keep your head down and work. I never got anything just skating by or having somebody just making handing you anything in life. I had to work from day one, whether that was football or whether that was starting my own company or whether it's going to be in this campaign. We're going to continue to work through this campaign as if we can win.
If you are elected, what are your top priorities?
We need to bring money back to the people for this district, absolutely, day one. This election is it's really not about the candidates, Jack. This election is about who's going to represent the people to bring value. 35 cents of every dollar is spent in federal taxes. People are scrimping and saving, they're looking for deals, cutting out coupons, looking to balance their checkbooks at the end of every month. Wouldn't it be nice if government met them halfway and did something economically for them as well? Wouldn't it be nice if you had a representative that would say, I'm going to advocate for our district. I'm going to bring money back for roads. I'm going to bring money back for bridges. I'm going to bring money back for schools so you don't have to have these vatries and these bonds to insult people to say, hey, we don't have enough educational money. We need to have more tax money. I'd like for our kids to have the best education in this district. Let's stop sending our money across seas for the arts or basket weaving or gender studies in Ethiopian. Let's bring the money back to the district. That's number one. Number two, we have to restore trust. 91% of the people in Congress are, 91% of the people say the people in Congress are not representing well. If that's the case, and we have severed the bands of trust, we need to start rebuilding those bonds of trust for the American people. We do that by stepping up and showing them that government can work. I think government needs to be less of a monopoly, and it needs to be much more competitive. We need to run our district like a business. And as a businessman who ran a business for 23 years, I fought with the insurance companies that had bureaucracies on behalf of my clients. Insurance companies would want, they'd be so happy, Jack, to take millions of dollars in premiums. But when things got a little dicey and they had to pay claims, unfortunately, sometimes not all of them would want to pay the money out. And so we would challenge them. I dealt with the bureaucracies to defend my clients to get the right outcomes. That's what I think people want as a representative here in this district, to defend them against the bureaucracy of the government, to say, hey, we're having a hard time making ends meet. We can't afford to pay any more property taxes. Let's bring some money back to fix the roads, the streets, the bridges, so that property taxes, local and state government doesn't have to bear such a heavy burden. You know what that's going to do? That's going to make everyone's life better in this district. That's going to grow the Republican Party. That's going to help all the state and local people get elected better. It's about building a team and working together. We have some candidates, and they talk about such divisive issues. And we are not in a position right now in the Republican Party to divide. We have to unite. And that means having a message of strength, which means that we have a plan. When people don't have plans, they start shouting out buzzwords. I'm this, I'm that. That's great. We're all those things. Now let's dispense with all the tomfoolery and all the buzzwords, and let's actually have plans that are going to make people's lives better. How? The old so what? Salespeople will say, well, I got this, that, and the other. Well, so what? How does that make my life better? That's what the people in the district want to know.
Affordability is an issue, and so I'm wondering, if you get into Congress, what would you do to try to make people's lives cost less to just get by every day?
Well, you know, we have to stop printing money unchecked. You know, there's a thing, as you may recall, the PPP loans that came out during COVID injected a tremendous amount of additional currency into our system. And anybody that knows anything about economics, I have a degree in it, but you don't even need a degree to know. The definition of inflation is too many dollars chasing too few goods. That's what it is. When the pandemic hit and things were shut down and we were not manufacturing, there was not a robust economy, it was totally stalled, and we dumped more cash into our system. We doused gasoline on the inflation fire. And a couple years later, when we turned around and we sent close to $300 billion to Ukraine, we started that fire even hotter and hotter. You know, $300 billion, we're so inoculated as to what kind of a number that is. Think of the Dallas Cowboys. That's a heck of a franchise. Now, add all other 31 NFL franchises together, and they've been around for over 100 years. Take their stadiums, take their TV rights, take all of the different components that create their net worth. And guess what? You'd have to multiply that times 2.5 to equate how much money we sent over to overseas recently in the Ukraine war. That's an issue, and what then comes back and creates inflation because we have more dollars in the circulatory system. Some of these dollars need to come back to the United States. Some of these dollars need to just not be printed at all. What happened is senior citizens that have been saving and they bought into our economic system for 40, 50, 60 years, your wealth just took about a third of a hit because of what happened with inflation. Now seniors are not able to afford their prescriptions. They don't have good health solutions. They're having a hard time paying their property taxes. It's because hamburgers went from $12 to $22 because of poor government management, in my opinion. That's why we need a business person to look after this district.
Where are you on President Trump's tariffs? Do you support them?
Well, I think President Trump is telling us that sometimes when you're a drug user, you have to sweat through and get through the addiction. We've been sold out for so long in this country that the tariffs are basically breaking a drug addiction. We cannot have China being controlled. You know that we have always been the producer of food in this country up until Joe Biden recently made some deals, and the Democrats have made some deals where we are now at a $50 billion trade deficit in agriculture, in food. That is the first time in maybe the history of the United States. It's not okay that we are no longer feeding the nation. We're importing more food than what we're exporting, to the tune of $50 billion.
Where are you getting that figure from?
I could source it later, but it was cited in some articles that I read.
And so what's the solution then in your mind?
The solution is we have to put Americans first, and the tariffs are going to initially, I believe, create some pain for people, but we have to be able to break free from having all of our things be imported. You remember during COVID, we had so many pharmaceuticals, necessary things in the medical field that if China cut us off, where would we be? How about silicon chips for our computers and our technology? If we are not able to acquiesce to certain countries' wishes, and they say no, we're gonna really jam you up, we're in a bad situation. And so I believe, Jack, that what we need to be able to do is we have to land where we have American-made, American workers are empowered, and we have independence, whether that's in energy, whether that's in silicone chip production, whether that's in food, all across the board. Now, if tariffs are the mechanism that's going to get us to be able to get to that point, then so be it. It's going to be uncomfortable initially, but what's more uncomfortable is being leveraged and not having the independence to be able to have Americans have the things that they need, especially in times of crisis.
There has been a lot of discussion about ICE. Many Democrats want to abolish ICE, some others want to overhaul ICE. Where are you on that, and what do you think about the two people who were killed in Minneapolis by either ICE or CPP agents?
Well, first of all, Jack, when any time anyone dies, it's a tragedy, right? And I have to say, where have we gone as Americans? We have to remember, you know, Republicans and Democrats have different positions, but we are all still Americans. We don't want death. But I will also say, how many people have died with illegal people committing crimes against them in this country? So I don't think that when we have a situation like this, that the reactionary thought is, well, just abandon it all, nuke it, throw it out. I think that that is knee-jerk, and I think that that is dangerous rhetoric to say, hey, we had a situation, so we're just going to completely just rip and shred it out. We don't do that. You know, J6, Ashley Babbitt was murdered on the J6 riots. We're not going to get rid of the Capitol Police, right? That was a very unfortunate event, and I would equate that was a very serious thing that occurred that needs to be looked into still. But we're not going to get rid of the Capitol Police, because why? We need to have the Capitol Police. They're there to protect and serve, right? We need to still continue to do what's right. And sometimes what's right is not easy. And sometimes there's good people and there's people that get into gray areas, and there's unfortunate situations, but we have to go forward for what's right for America. What's right for America is to be able to get violent criminals out of America. And I think that's what ICE is trying to do. Now we're going to need to go through this in a thoughtful manner. But I really, you know, it hurts me to say, you know, when we had the riots at J6, President Trump was to blame. And then when we had the riots in Minnesota, people are saying President Trump is to blame again. I think Tim Walz needs to take some accountability. It was in his state. So what we really need to do is actually, honestly, less finger pointing. And we need to come together and we need to get problem solving, where we sit down and people from both parties say, what's the right thing to do for the American people? And let's, as a group of educated individuals, let's get together and let's make policy that is effective instead of pointing fingers and talk about ripping out, you know, entire institutions. It's not healthy, it's not productive, and it's not the right way to go.
Do you think ICE should or needs to make some changes given what has happened? There's been a lot of complaints about ICE going door to door, et cetera. What do you say to that?
I think that we have to always consider optics, and I agree with what President Trump is doing, that illegal people that are here committing crimes need to be extracted. Now let's do it in a manner where the ICE people are also protected. I think of them having a camera, it's just like when I represented people in the trucking industry. I was in favor of dashboard cameras. Why? Because the trucker was always wrong. And you know what the cameras caught when they were outward facing? They would catch cars scooting in front of them, and those cars were responsible for the accidents. But without the cameras, you could never see that. I think ICE having the cameras is going to be a good thing to document, because if they're doing the right actions, they have the proof to go against somebody's wrongful statement. But I think we have to stay the course, and what we have to do is what's right for the American people always.
Many Republicans in Texas are criticizing Sharia law. They're also going after CARE and the Muslim Brotherhood. Where are you on this issue?
Well, we have to follow one law in this country, and that's the Constitution, period. Our country is founded in the Constitution. It has got to be the law that we follow. We cannot have subsets of other different laws that exist. It's just like years ago when we had other different currencies, in that when our nation was young, and we had other currencies that were introduced, and it was very confusing for a lot of people. This is a country of laws. We must follow our Constitution. Anybody that wants to try to bring alternate laws here to the United States that are going to undercut the Constitution, the principle of American laws, it cannot exist. It must not exist. And we need to do whatever we can to make sure that we remain a nation of laws. And so we have to protect our culture, we have to protect our values, and whatever it takes to make sure we follow our Constitution and the laws of our state and local governments has to remain in place always.
Regarding Iran, do you think that the U.S. should bomb the Ayatollah's regime, given the reports that the Ayatollah and the regime are killing their own people?
I'd like to see the United States be a leader in world policy. I don't think the United States needs to be the one solely enacting wars and getting into wars that could be never-ending wars that are a drain on the taxpayer. So I'm always going to be very cautious on being quick to just say, hey, let's go to war, let's drop bombs. Whenever there's life at hand, we have to be very cognizant and we have to be very judicious on how we use power. With great power comes great responsibility, right? The United States has to be strong and we have to be a leader. But President Trump and the leaders of our government would have more information and details than I would at this particular point to make a comment on whether we should or not in this specific situation. But I think across the board, we need to always be a leader in world policy, but we also need to not be the only one leading. Other nations need to also chip in when we do other actions that could be substantial. And when the United States does act and we do free a country, I think the taxpayers are entitled to some sort of a benefit for that military expenditure as well.
In Gaza, do you support President Trump's plan to rebuild, and should Hamas be forced to disarm?
Yes, I do absolutely support President Trump in that decision. I think that it is the right decision, and they absolutely have to disarm. If they're not going to disarm, then they're just going to rebuild, and we're going to have to deal with this again down the road. We've seen the tragedy, we've seen the loss of life. You know, we need to start having spines with leadership in these types of situations, and we didn't have it with the last administration like we should. And I hate to say it, but I'm just saying what I feel. We need to be diligent and strong to make sure that we don't have any more loss of life in this type of situation going forward. And that means being strong right now as a leader to make sure certain things are done appropriately.
There's been some debate within the Republican Party about support for Israel, both financial and just support. Where are you on that?
Well, I think Israel might have just as much or more money than America. Last I checked, we're how many trillion in debt? How about some support for America, maybe? I don't know. Certainly, we want to provide Israel support with our military assets because we've always been a friend of Israel. And I think that must continue. We need to be strong, and the United States has to have good allies. But financially speaking, Jack, we're in a really bad spot right now, the United States is. And that it pains me to hear that we're going to continue to invest in other countries, no matter who they are, until we get our balance sheet cleaned up. We can't afford to not get our finances under control in this country.
How do you do that?
Well, you know, we don't have a revenue problem, we have a spending problem, and it's things like this that perpetuate the cycle. How do you do it? How does any American do it? You know, our government is like it would be like an American that wants to fly in a private plane, buy a bunch of Ferraris, jet set, and you're only making $100,000 a year. You can't spend more than what you bring in. We're shipping so much money to other places, and we're printing money at such an extent that it's creating such a debt and a load on our future generations. How do you do it? You need to have a balanced budget. We need to have lawmakers that are going to go to the Hill and they're going to say, no, we're not going to mortgage our kids' future. Enough is enough. We're going to look at, the budget. You have a discretionary budget and you have the mandatory side budget. We're going to look at the components of the budget themselves, and we're going to look and see, and we're going to say, okay, mandatory spending, we need to have Social Security. We need to have Medicaid and Medicare. But let's look at who's administrating these benefits, and let's make sure that they're being administrated in the best fashion. Let's make sure that it's not like, some of the charities that I've given money to where you learn later that 50 cents on every dollar goes to admin fees. Let's get RFQs and RFPs to make sure that these benefits are appropriated in the most effective manner possible so that the average American citizen gets the absolute best form of government and their tax dollar. That's one area. And then on the discretionary spending, let's take a real hard look and say, are these things that the United States really need to be spending money towards? We send a lot of things towards, You know, I mentioned it earlier, gender studies in Timbuktu. Is that something that a mom that gets up, a single mom that gets up at 5 in the morning to go work at a diner and drops her kids off at her mom's house, she should be paying her taxes towards somebody else having, you know, gender studies in Timbuktu? I don't think so. We need to have our budget work for Americans again, and we need to trim the fat. And I think that's what Americans want. And that's why we have an affordability crisis right now, Jack.
Last question, and that's on Venezuela. Did you support the U.S. capturing Nicolas Maduro, bringing him to the United States to have him stand trial on drug trafficking charges? And if you support it or oppose it, and what would you like to see happen next in Venezuela?
I think that the answer is yes, and here's why. Many people aren't aware that this gentleman, not a gentleman, but this individual, he confiscated a tremendous amount of United States assets and put it under the Venezuelan government. And not only that, the drug trade and the drugs that are coming across into our border has got to stop. I supported the action because it was swift. It happened by the time I went to bed. I woke up in the next morning, he was already in the hands of our custody. This is at the hands of the United States military that works. What I don't support is endless wars that drain resources from taxpayers and put a burden on future generations where there's mass casualties. We need to do surgery with a scalpel, not a butcher knife. And this was an example of smart intelligence and our government and our men and women serving this country so admirably to do a wonderful job to get justice for everybody.
Paul Bondar, candidate for the 32nd Congressional District. Thank you so much.
Jack Fink, thank you.
We appreciate it.
God bless.